Mark is from Two Way TV, which is amazing. You guys should check it out. It is Two Way TV. Mark, you've been ahead of the curve here for a couple weeks. You've been kind of whispering and saying, hey, guys, the data is not as good as you might think if you're on the left and if you're in the Democrat Party. Based on your broadcast on Two Way TV, it is universally agreed on all sides that there's been a shift in Trump's direction the last 2 weeks. What do you attribute this to, Mark? I think partially it is just that Republicans tend to close better in recent presidential elections than Democrats. Is there something else at play here?
Well, definitely attribute to that. And I thank you both for your kind words. And I am just an old-fashioned reporter. I'm for the American people. So I'm not rooting for Donald Trump or rooting for Kamala Harris. I'm just trying to report what's happening and allow people to understand as best I can do that from talking to sources on both sides. In this case, I think there may be something to what you're saying, Republicans closing strong. I also think, as I have since Kamala Harris ascended to the nomination, that the basic question was, would she be defined as a good steward of a good economy, as someone who'd be a fierce commander in chief, or would she be defined on the terms of the Trump campaign, weak, failed, and dangerously liberal? And I think through the actions of Donald Trump himself, through their advertising, and through Kamala Harris's failure to directly address the hardest question she gets when she talks to reporters, I think a lot of the undecided voters have shifted to Trump, either feeling they don't know enough about her, or feeling that she's too liberal, or feeling insulted that she's not answering the questions.
Yeah, so Mark, let's dive into some news yesterday. Kamala Harris is traveling the country with Liz Cheney on a country over party tour, which we imagine, just kind of looking at this from the outside, is they're looking at their internals thinking that they have to win over more Republicans. Would you say that is likely their strategy right now, that they have to win over center-right disaffected Republicans in order to achieve electoral success?
Well, they don't just have one challenge, and it's changed the true of the Trump campaign. There's not a single demographic that they're going for, but there's no doubt that the Harris campaign has shifted a little bit with this focus on not just Liz Cheney and disaffected Republicans who may have voted for Nikki Haley in a primary or a caucus, but more back to the Biden message of this is about January 6th and about whether Donald Trump's fit to hold office, not engaging on the economy as much, not engaging on abortion as much, although they're still talking about those two issues. But this seems to be their dominant closing argument. The challenge they have is they still have other problems, particularly young men of color, Hispanic men and Latino men and Black men, in a demographic that, of course, exists across all 7 battleground states. They also have a problem with Jewish voters and Arab and Muslim American voters. And they've also got a problem with working class voters, and men generally. So again, Trump campaign has its own demographic issues to address as well. But part of the challenge for the vice president is she's got some narrow issues with demographics and some broad issues with demographics. And finding the ability to message all those things at once has proven to be a challenge for her. And I think that's a big part of why she is behind right now.
So Mark, I took some notes from your wonderful conversation with Tucker Carlson, and correct me if this is incorrect, but you basically said that the Kamala Harris campaign is betting on 4 things. And I'm of the camp that I think this race is actually far closer than some of the bulls in Trump world say. I think that it's far closer than even the betting markets suggest. And I think these 4 things we really need to think about for those of us that enthusiastically want to see Donald Trump return. You argue that the Kamala Harris campaign believes that the abortion vote is a hidden vote and it's not really popping up in the data, that they have a ground game that is superior to Donald Trump's, they believe that, and that they have an old-fashioned organizer either as a campaign manager or is in senior leadership of their campaign, that they believe that the female vote or the woman vote is going to be even greater than polling suggests, and this will truly be the battle of the sexes, and women do tend to vote at higher rates than men. And finally, that there is an unappreciated Trump fatigue or a Trump ceiling that is going to manifest in some of these states. Is that a correct summary of the 4 things that the Kamala Harris campaign is betting on?
Well, I'd also add the rank incompetence of the people doing turnout for President Trump. Just kidding. That was a joke, Charlie. So I have to laugh at that. Yes, that is a good list.
I'm laughing, Mark.
All right. That is a good list. And and although my sources, including my independent sources, I've got some secret sources who are just independent analysts of the data, and even though they'd all say Trump is the favorite, that list is why if Kamala Harris wins the election, I won't be surprised at all, because we're dealing with a cycle coming out of COVID with a replacement candidate, with Trump on the ballot for the third time, with all the lawfare and the assassinations, all the things that have gone on. This is a cycle that even the best pollsters will tell you very difficult to get a read on. So I think from both a practical point of view and a sanity point of view, I think your posture is probably a better one than the folks at Mar-a-Lago who are already measuring the drapes in different cabinet departments in the Oval Office. It could be Trump wins easily. I don't think a Harris easy victory is in the cards. Could be a Trump easy win, but it could be a very narrow Trump loss as well. And the reasons I listed that you repeated back, I think, are the main reasons to think that this could produce a surprise for those who currently believe, as my sources do, that Trump is got the upper hand.
So let's dive into one of them, which is the abortion topic. Mark, how have you seen data in recent elections, let's say the last 20 years, where an issue that is not popping in the public issue surveys ends up being determinative or a kind of secret issue, if you will? Have you ever seen evidence of that?
It's a great question. It's a little bit of a difficult thing to kind of get an apples to apples comparison on. But I would say in 2016, some of the issues related to forever wars, some of the issues related to economics, some of the cultural issues that Donald Trump talked about, I don't think you would have seen in the polling leading up to Election Day. And depending on how the questions were asked, wouldn't necessarily have even seen it in the exit poll questions. I think those issues were more powerful in allowing Donald Trump to narrowly beat Hillary Clinton than the polling leading up to the election suggested, in part because people didn't think to ask about it in the level of detail they should have. That's not one issue. That's a cluster of issues. But that's the dynamic I'm talking about, which is it's not like the polls don't take into account abortion and reproductive freedom. It's not like it isn't talked about a lot in the media. But it could be it's a more energizing issue for who actually decides to vote rather than how they vote that makes the difference.
I tend to agree. Again, I'm a contrarian by nature, and I am in far too many group text messages that are a little too cocky for my liking and a little bit too bullish.
Yeah.
And I say, guys, first of all, this issue is a thermonuclear issue that is far bigger than trade policy. I'm sorry. There's a potency, there's a personal nature to this issue that is unlike anything else. And would you agree that there has not been so this is important, Mark. Let me say this. Democrats in all of their blogs and in their intelligentsia would repeat this phrase: since the reversal of Roe or the Dobbs decision, we have overperformed every poll. Is that largely correct?
It is largely correct. It's been in ballot measures, which are a different kettle of fish than a presidential election. But yes, there's not a single that I know of, at least. It's certainly generally true that on these ballot measures, they pass much more overwhelmingly than the polling suggested.
Andrew, do you have a thought here for Mark?
Yeah, I'm looking for a clip, Mark. I wanted to get your reaction to it, but I'll describe it for you here. Harry Enton,
it went viral yesterday.
CNN. I mean, he's basically out there saying that Trump is bleeding support with white, non-college educated, and it's slight, but it's such a huge portion of the pie here. So are you seeing that in any of the internals that you're reviewing? Is that, Charlie immediately checked with the Trump campaign. They're saying they're not seeing that in their data. We're not seeing it in our data, but apparently it's out there in someone's data. Yeah.
I mean, Harry is a friend of mine. He's a very good analyst. I think, a lot of the data he's brought forward over the last couple of weeks has cut in the other direction. I've not seen that consistently over polls. And if it were happening in using the word bleeding, Trump wouldn't be ahead in these battleground states where he is largely either even or ahead. So I don't think that's a real thing, but it's worth watching. I think the bigger problem Trump might have is with turnout rather than who people are saying they're for, is getting his folks to the polls, because Trump is dependent to win. And Mar-a-Lago will tell you this, on lower propensity voters. That's what you all have been focused on, because turning out those folks is a challenge. But if you succeed, you change not just the outcome of the election, you change the electorate if you can get these people to be part of the MAGA coalition.
So, Mark, about a minute and a half remaining in this segment. How much should we glean or read into early voting? So Republicans are off to a quick start in early voting comparative to prior elections. In fact, as of this broadcast right now, Republicans are enjoying a lead in early voting in Arizona because they do party affiliation. Can this be misleading, or how predictive can early voting trends be?
Well, the more of it that comes in, the more predictive or determinative I would say it is. In fact, and again, this is a big if. So I say if the current early vote data stays on this trajectory, we won't need to vote on election day to know who's going to win. Right now, Republicans are doing so well in the early vote, not as well as Democrats, but they don't need to. The delta between Republicans and Democrats this time so far is so small, and Republicans' advantage on election day voting so large, that if this continues, we will know on election day before the polls open that Donald Trump has won. That is scaring Democrats. They're hoping that the first few days are an aberration and they open up a big lead. They will not open up, even under the most optimistic scenario for Democrats, the same size lead they had in 2020. But they need a bigger lead, substantially bigger lead in these states. And in Nevada, always say it wrong, which is by acclamation, according to my sources, the best of the 7 states for Kamala Harris. The current early vote is disastrous for her, including in Clark County, where Vegas is the biggest county by far in the state. So if this continues, and this is more important for folks who want to understand where the election's headed, this is way more important than any poll you'll read. If this continues, as I said, you'll wake up on election day. You will not need to wait to see who votes on election day, because Trump's ability to win on election day will be unquestioned.